New Zealand has reported a fourth day of declining number of confirmed cases of the coronavirus. This small Pacific island seems to have defied the odds, imposing a short, sharp and brutal lockdown, setting the country now under lockdown for a month, a level 4 lockdown. And the Prime Minister has been praised for making the hard decisions early. But is it too late for other countries to follow in this example? CNN's Ivan Watson joins us now live from Hong Kong with more on this. So, Ivan, where are we at with following New Zealand? Is it too late for others to do what they've done?
The interesting thing that we heard from the New Zealand's Prime Minister is she says that about 2 weeks ago, according to government modeling, the country was on a trajectory to potentially follow the very tragic path of Spain and Italy, which have both had more than 10,000 deaths. And instead, she imposed a 4-week lockdown. The borders had already been closed. And now New Zealand can report 4 days of declining cases of coronavirus, as well as only 1 death thus far. So New Zealand is setting a very ambitious goal, trying to eliminate the disease completely from its shores. In the midst of a deadly pandemic sweeping the globe, the leader of New Zealand sounds a note of optimism.
Yesterday, I remain cautiously optimistic that we are starting to turn a corner.
Since the beginning of the outbreak, New Zealand has identified more than 1,200 coronavirus cases and suffered just 1 death. Do you think New Zealand has lessons to offer other countries with how it has dealt with this crisis?
I think the go hard, go early is the lesson, but obviously we're not out of the woods yet.
New Zealand identified its first case of coronavirus on February 28th. Less than 3 weeks later, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern announced New Zealand would become one of the first democracies to shut its borders.
From 11:59 p.m. tonight, we will close our border to any non-residents and citizens attempting to travel here.
The ban on foreign visitors, a dramatic move for an island nation whose economy depends on tourism.
Over the past few weeks, the world has changed, and it has changed very quickly.
2 days later, a rare address from the Prime Minister's office, not seen in New Zealand in decades, outlining a response plan. Just 4 days after that, Ardern imposed a state of emergency and announced a nationwide shutdown.
As we head into the next 4 weeks, stay at home. It will break the chain of transmission, and it will save lives.
Enforcement hasn't been easy. Police received tens of thousands of reports of people ignoring the lockdown, including these surfers. But the most egregious case came from the country's health minister.
And I was wrong.
Ardern demoted but did not fire him after he drove his family to the beach for a walk.
I've been a bit of an idiot, if I'm being frank, and I understand why people will be angry with me.
Ardern was thrust into the international spotlight last year when an Australian gunman massacred Muslims in the city of Christchurch. 72 hours after the deadliest mass shooting in New Zealand's history, Ardern announced a ban on semi-automatic weapons, while also consoling a traumatized nation.
Evening, everyone.
In this latest crisis, the 39-year-old has shown her softer side, broadcasting live on Facebook in a sweatshirt and sending a message to children that despite the lockdown, the Easter Bunny is still an essential worker.
And if the Easter Bunny doesn't make it to your household, then we have to understand that it's a bit difficult at the moment for the bunny to perhaps get everywhere.
It is far too early to say whether New Zealand's strategy will succeed, but there may be some lessons here for other countries grappling with coronavirus. Now, John, you asked, could this be repeated elsewhere? Is it too late for other places? One public health expert I spoke with in New Zealand argues that you could, even in places like the U.S. right now, which is suffering so terribly, you could create islands of stability with isolation with contact tracing to try to stamp the disease out with this kind of 14-day incubation period. And it's notable that in New Zealand's case, though they've had some success, certainly over the last 4 days, there are still 2 weeks of this strict lockdown ahead for the nation. And the Prime Minister announced that any returning citizen flying into the country will now have to go into a mandatory 14-day quarantine under supervision at some kind of approved facility. So the country is not letting up. It's just getting more strict, again, with this ultimate ambitious goal of trying to wipe the disease out completely on the island nation.
That is not an easy decision for a nation which has more international visitors than its entire population every year. A 14-day mandatory quarantine, but they got to do it, I guess. So Ivan, thank you. Ivan Watson there with the story about New Zealand's efforts to contain this virus. Thank you.